Welcome back to Open Source. I'm here with Ben James. Let's talk additional tech because one thing that you guys are doing that's super interesting is, yeah, 3D, but like like 3D blockchain and AR, VR, AI. Like you have to know all of these different technologies and then find a 3D version. Let's go at one at a time and just try to understand how you're doing it. Let's start with blockchain. So how does 3D work with the blockchain?
Well, what's interesting is, in a way, all of these technologies work together very well. But in particular, blockchain and 3D had their moment a couple of years ago when people were thinking about things like metaverse and NFT collections a little bit. But I think what has evolved in the space that's particularly interesting is now blockchain is being used to assign provenance and ownership and authenticity to the 3D assets that are being created. And that's particularly important in 3D, but it's also particularly important when you try to think about how does 3D interact with other technologies like XR, like AI, because things like ownership and authenticity become increasingly important to assign to those assets. And blockchain is very, very good about tracing that ownership and authenticity.
You're like so good at answering questions. Like it's like you clearly know your stuff because it's especially like these are really like sort of siloed, parts of the process, but you obviously know every aspect very well. Okay, AR, VR, I mean augmented reality, virtual reality. This I can kind of figure out for myself a bit more, but how is 3D working with AR, VR?
So, it's kind of this idea that the world we're used to living in as humans is spatial, is three-dimensional. And so when when we want to add this technology, this 3D technology into the world around us, using that spatial component is really important. And that means you need sort of fundamentally 3D objects, not only as virtual objects that you will instantiate into places like in a VR headset, but also in something like in XR, where you want to augment the world around you with additional content. You'll use even features of both the 3D world around you, as well as the features of the 3D content that you've created in a way to make a seamless blend between sort of reality and virtual reality. And I think we're still on the way there, but there are some very exciting projects that are essentially trying to push 3D in this direction.
Does that include concerts? Like that just made me think like holographs and like I can see like a digital version of Beyonce at a concert. Is that in
Yeah,
that kind of world?
that's definitely in that kind of world, and it's everything from, when you think about this technology, sometimes you tend to think about the really flashy aspects of this technology, like concerts, new forms of entertainment, but that can also be training simulations, right? That might be using a digital twin to help somebody learn on the job faster. That might be navigation systems that are oriented around real world landmarks. So I think there's this really interesting balance, and that's where 3D is becoming so omnipresent, because it doesn't just have that entertainment factor anymore. I mean, it definitely does have the entertainment factor, and that's very interesting about it. And that's the area that we focus on at 404. But at the same time, you do see it expanding into other industries, and I think that's why people are also getting pretty excited about connecting 3D with all this new technology.
Like digital twin technology, it really should be its own show, and maybe you should come back and we can just do a show on that because I mean that alone is so powerful. And let's get
Yeah.
to the next thing I want to get to with 3D is AI. This I have no idea how this is working. How is 3D working with AI?
Well, I mean, so if you think about 3D becoming more important to the world around us, if you think about 3D and digital twins and these XR applications creating new types of content, experiences, and training, all of a sudden the demand for content goes through the roof. So the demand for 3D content goes through the roof. And there's a real bottleneck with traditional processes of hand modeling or manually modeling these 3D objects. And so where AI comes in is AI is very, very good at taking 2D forms of representation and turning them into 3D environments. At least that's the latest technology that's being built, and what we're specifically focused on. So what AI is doing in this case is basically supercharging 3D in order to keep up with the increased demand that's happening in the world around us.
I'm not joking, man. You got to come back. Like you're so knowledgeable in all these different aspects of the process, and as someone who hosts a show about technology, I know that like it takes a lot of knowledge to know each of these things, and you're like seamlessly going like this thing and that thing and that and this aspect. Look, you're the perfect guy to be doing all of this amazing work that you guys are doing, and I can't wait to learn more. We've got Ben James here on open source.